Hello everyone. A couple years ago, I made a video about whether or not it was safe to steam can in the Nesco canner. At the time, I had my doubts about whether or not it was, and I recommended against doing it, or at least I said I was not going to do it. Now, over this last 2 years, I personally haven't done steam canning, so I've stuck with what I said in that video, and I do still have some of the same concerns about the different things that are floating around about steam canning in the Nesco or the Carey canner. However, I have since then learned some things that have kind of changed my mind, or at least given me an idea, a way to safely steam can in the Nesco or Carey canner in a way that is based on the USDA guidelines for steam canning. So that's what I'm going to get into in today's video. I'm Rebecca from StockingMyPantry.com. Okay, so first I want to give credit where credit is due. I got my initial idea for this from a video that Rose Red Homestead made. In the video, I can't remember the exact title, but I'll put a link for it. And it's something about how to make your own steam canner or something like that. At the time, I didn't pay that much attention to it because I didn't have a traditional water bath canner. But I just revisited this topic, and then I started to get some ideas about how to do the same thing in the Nesco or the Carey canner. Now, before I go further, let me say that according to the USDA and these different state extension offices, when steam canning, you're supposed to have the jars above the water. Now, there's a lot of people who say that doesn't matter, it's all the same, whatever. But if you want to do it according to the USDA, with steam canning, your jars need to sit above the water. Okay, so that's a key point to keep in mind. Now, in this video, I'm going to demonstrate 3 different ways to follow the guidelines and to steam can in the Nesco, according to in a way that holds the jars above the water. Before I get into that, I do want to say that I still have some of the same misgivings about steam canning, and part of it is I just spent some time in some of these different wonderful Facebook groups about the Nesco or the Carey canner, and if you type in steam canning, you're going to get a lot of different opinions, a lot of different methods. That is still a concern of mine, and that's why it's so confusing and why I haven't recommended it up to this point. Also, I do understand that Mr. Carey is doing some testing on steam canning. I hope that's not just a rumor, and maybe eventually there will be an official guideline, official method that is put out by the Nesco or Carey company for this. In the meantime, though, I think that either of these 3 methods that I'm going to show you will work. They each have their pros and cons. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Okay, so the first way calls for putting in 4 cups of water into the canner. I already have the canning rack in, and we're going to put 4 cups of water in. Now, I'm not sure how clear it is, but the 4 cups of water goes just beneath the canning rack. And so since it goes just beneath the canning rack, that fits with the guidelines of the jars sitting above the canner, or above the water. The problem, of course, with this is that 4 cups of water is not very much. Out of curiosity, last night I tested this with 4 cups of water. I put my jars in, and I ran my canner for 20 minutes. And I'll talk about that process. It's basically the same process as water bath canning. But anyway, I did it for 20 minutes. At the end of 20 minutes, I was left with 1 cup of water in the canner. Now, also, I'm at a higher altitude, not real high, but anyway, I have to add 5 minutes onto my water bath recipes. And so basically, that would have been a 15-minute a recipe that called for 15 minutes of processing time. I ran it for 20. I was left with 1 cup of water. So I wouldn't want to do, I think that would be fine to do for, say, jams or jellies that, take only 10 minutes or something. You wouldn't run out of water. That would be fine. Okay, the next set of instructions that I've seen from people is to put water in up to this, I think it's the 4 mark. And I checked that out, and that is 6 cups of water. So I'm going to pour 2 more cups of water in. And you'll see, hopefully you can see, the water is now quite a bit above the rack. So according to the USDA, that would not be okay. So the question now is, what do you do about this? And I came up with this idea that I think will work well. Okay, so I'm going to take that rack out, and I'm going to put 4 canning rings. These are wide mouth rings around the bottom of the pot. And then I'm putting the steam rack that comes with the canner on top of that, and then the canning rack on top of that. And whether or not you can see it, I'm not sure, but this gives you plenty of room to where the jars are above the water. So that would work. Now, with this method and with the next one I'm going to show you, one problem is that it makes everything too tall to do quarts. So you could only use this method for pints, half pints, the 4-ounce jars, and so on. But it would work for that, and that gives you 6 cups of water. I haven't tested how long you could run it, but obviously it's 2 additional cups, so you could run it longer than you could if you only did 4 cups. I have also seen people provide instructions that say to put 8 cups of water in. Now, I think that 8 cups comes from the fact that when you pressure can, you put 8 cups of water in. So that means let's add an additional 2 cups in. Okay, so now with 8 cups of water in there, it brings it right up to the tippy top of this, which is totally fine. Now, if like me, you have 2 canners, 2 Nesco canners, that means you have an additional steam rack, an additional canning rack. Technically, you could add those in and give you even a little bit more room. That I would only recommend if you are doing a steam canning with a longer processing time. Okay, so you can see though how adding in the rings at the bottom and then the different racks that come with it give you options for elevating the racks above the water. And that is the one thing that really makes it line up with the steam canning guidelines that are put out by the USDA and the different extension offices. Now, if you use these extra racks, you technically don't have to use the canning rings. Let me just show you how that would work. Take the canning rings out. Put a rack down, put that on it, another rack, and this. And so even without putting the canning rings on the bottom, it'll work if you have these 2 sets. So basically there's a few different ways that you can do it, and this easily accommodates the 8 cups of water. You could even put a little bit more in even without these rings if you wanted to, let's say, do a 40-minute processing recipe. Now that brings me to the next part of this video where I want to talk about the safe steam canning guidelines in general, okay? And I'll talk about how to do that in the Nesco or the Carey canner. Okay, so these particular guidelines that I'm using are from the South Dakota State University Extension, but they're the same steam canning guidelines that I've seen in other state agencies. Okay, so first of all, foods must have pH of 4.6 or lower. Basically, they need to be high acid foods, the same kind of things that you would water bath can. Okay, it says to use a research-tested and evidence-based recipe. You know, again, that's general safe canning guidelines. Recipes made for a water bath canner can be adapted for a steam canner. Now, here's the first step that you need to do is jars must be heated before filling and can be hot or raw packed. Okay, so what I have seen in many guidelines is you want the water in the canner to be hot and you want your jars to be heated up. So there's a couple of ways to do that in the Nesco. I'm just going to put this one jar in as a demonstration. I have the water in the canner. I have water in my jar. Let's pretend if I was doing 4 jars, I would have 4 jars in the canner. If I was doing 5, I would have 5. You close it, you shut the lid. You don't need to close it. And one way I like to do it is let me make sure you can see this. I press the brown and then start. Now, this is the way that I typically do it, and it will start heating up the jars and the water. Once it's hot, if I'm still, during this time while it's heating up, what I do is that I go ahead and I get my recipe ready. I do everything else that I need to do to get ready to do the canning. Once it's hot, I just turn it off, okay? And I leave the lid on and I leave the jars in the canner so that they stay hot. So this other way to do it is to press water bath and then put in the time for your recipe. Let's say that your recipe called for 15 minutes. Oh, I can't see what's here, but okay, that's 22 minutes. But anyway, you would put in the time and you would press start. Now, this is going to start heating up. If it starts getting too hot before you're ready, you can just press start twice and that'll stop it, and then you'll reprogram it when you're ready to do the canning. Okay, so now your jars are hot, your water's hot. You would take the jars, the hot jars, out of the canner. And you're going to dump out the excess water. And then you're going to fill your jars with your recipe, your salsa, whatever it is that you're making. Wipe the rims, put the lids on, that type of thing. And then you're going to put them back into the canner, okay? An alternate way to do it, but it takes a little bit of thinking, is that let's say that I am putting 8 cups of water in my canner and I have 4 jars. I could put 4 cups of water into the canner, a half a cup into each of my jars, and once it's hot, I just dump the water back into the canner. So I prefer that method because then I don't have to dump it into a bowl or take it to the sink or whatever. But the bottom line is you want to heat the jars, heat the water. If you have excess water in your jars, dump it in the sink or dump it into a bowl. Okay, and so you would just basically fill your jars, put the lids on, wipe the rims, all the stuff that you normally do, put them all into your canner, and now you're going to do the actual canning process. So you shut the lid, you would press water bath or steam, put in the time. I can't really see what I'm doing, but whatever the time would be, and press start. At this point, you're going to wait for the steady stream of steam, and once you see that, you would press start again, and then it will start to do the countdown process. So I do have a whole rather in-depth video on how to water bath can in the Nesco. I'll link to that because the process is, except for your water level, the process is exactly the same. Okay, so in short, to summarize, There's a lot of instructions floating around about how to steam can in the Nesco. Almost all of them end up with water partially covering the jars. A lot of people say that's no big deal. And you know what, to be honest with you, it could be no big deal. But if you want to follow the recommendations by the USDA, you want your jars to be sitting above the water. Either using just 4 cups of water, but then you're very limited with the processing time, or using these rings to elevate the rack, and you can put in 6 cups of water. And if you want to even be able to put more water, you can use, racks and everything from 2 different canners. So those are all ways that you can do it. The key thing to keep in mind is to elevate the rack above the water, and then you'll be following the USDA guidelines for steam canning in your Nesco or your Carey canner. So I hope that makes sense to you, and I hope that you found it helpful. If you did, and if you would like more tips on how to can in the Nesco or Carey canner, I'd appreciate it if you would give me a thumbs up, if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss any of my other tips and tricks. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.